Thanks, that was great. For 2,000 years, every generation has found a way to worship God in a unique way. And what we have done here tonight is probably the most important thing we will do. Because everybody here was hardwired to worship God. Every human being is hardwired to worship. It was St. Augustine that said, "We are all restless until we find our rest in Thee, O God." I'll give you a quote. It's the quote of the night. What comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. What comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you, even if you don't believe in Him, because it shapes everything you do and everything you want to be. That's something. But I really appreciate the night of worship. There is something that happens when people worship together. There is something that happens inside of us that makes us more human. And I know it does for me. Well, we are talking this weekend about the basic foundational evidence for our faith. And we're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is that there are people who think that if you're going to really believe in Christianity, you have to take your brain out and put it on a shelf. And I don't think there is anything that could be further from the truth. The other is that there are an awful lot of us who know we have something inside in our relationship with God, but it's really hard for us to articulate in a clear and logical way when we're asked about it. Why we believe exactly what we believe. And Peter said that we should always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks for the hope that is within us. So that's why we're doing this study on the foundational evidence for our faith. Last night we talked about the evidence that is inside of us and outside of us for the existence of God. Tonight we're going to talk about the evidence for the Bible and answering the question, is the Bible true? The Bible is a remarkable book by all accounts. It is 66 individual books all bound into a single volume. It was written over a period of 1,600 years by 40 different authors in 3 different languages. It is divided into 2 major parts. The old agreement between God and man that we call the Old Testament. That's 39 books. And then the new agreement, based on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, 27 books. We call that the New Testament. It's written with a profound unity, with a single theme. The Germans have a single word for that theme. It's called Heilsgeschichte. I think I said that right. That means salvation history. That's what the German theologians call it. It is the irrepressible love of God for you. It contains history and poetry and ethics, some medical advice, some practical wisdom, and the greatest story ever told. It is a remarkable book. But the question is it true? Is it really true? A couple of years ago, I was playing golf with a guy. And I had never met him before. And throughout the day, I found out that he was interested in God, but he wasn't interested in church at all. So I suggested that maybe he should read the Bible. And he gave me that kind of sympathetic smile that people give sometimes. It's kind of a condescending kind of smile. He went, "Oh, yeah. Yeah." And he teed his ball up. And I thought I'd help him out. I said, "Oh, I know, you probably don't think the Bible's true, do you?" And he said, I just have trouble. It was written a long time ago. And I said, "Yeah, I bet you think it's kind of like the game of telephone." He said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, like the old game where you whisper something in somebody's ear and they whisper it in the next person. It goes all the way around the room. By the time it comes back, it's a whole different story. I bet you think it's kind of like that. I bet you think it's kind of like the story of the legend of Paul Bunyan. You know, Paul Bunyan was probably a pretty big guy and everything, but by the time the song was written, he was, 63 axe handles high, with his feet on the ground and his head in the sky. Paul Bunyan? Okay, obviously you didn't sing that song when you grew up, but the guy said, yeah, that's exactly what I thought, what I think about the Bible. A lot of people do. I don't blame them. I mean, the Bible was written 2,000 years ago, before the printing press, before copying machines. How do we know? That's the first question we're going to answer. How do we know that what we have in our hands is what was originally written? And the whole thing about Jesus didn't come about hundreds of years later, like the story of Paul Bunyan. All right. Let me answer that question first. There are tests that they give to find out the authenticity of a piece of ancient literature. And I think we should apply the same test to the Bible. And there are three basic questions that people will put to any piece of ancient literature to see if what we have is what was originally written. The first question to answer is, how close is your copy, your earliest copy, to the original writing? Because if that gap is really large, then of course there's a lot of changes that could take place in between. But there are gaps always, because the original copy disintegrates over time. Because the paper or the papyrus or whatever it's written on goes away, so it has to be a copy. So how close is your earliest copy? The second question is, how many copies do you have? And then the third question is, what's their variance? How much do they vary one to another? Those are the three questions. And let me give you an idea of other literature. And to do that, I need you to kind of make me an aisle right here. Can you just it doesn't have to be very wide. All right? That's good. Perfect. All right. For the sake of illustration, let's say that right here at the beginning of the mat is the original writing. That's when whatever was written was really written. And then each row that I walk by will signify 100 years from that original writing. Let's take Aristotle. You all recognize that name. Aristotle, the reason you recognize that name is because we have his writings. Did you know that? We don't have like a picture. But we have his writings. He wrote he wrote at 340 BC. Okay, 340 years before Christ is the original writing. The earliest copy that we have of Aristotle's writing is 1100 AD. Okay, it's 1400 years from the original writing, which is a pretty big gap. Let's see. That'd be 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. It would be all the way to the back. Let me walk. You guys don't have to watch this, but I'm going to put down here. We have, and there are 5 copies of Aristotle's writings in existence, and it's 1400 years from the original. All right? Caesar wrote the history of the Gallic Wars. He wrote them in 50 BC. The earliest copy we have, you thought I was coming back, is 1000 BC, or 1000 AD. That's almost 1100 years from the writing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All the way back here, we have 9 copies of his writings. The king of all manuscripts is Homer. He wrote the Iliad, right? He wrote the Iliad in about 850 BC, and the earliest copy we have is about 150 AD. But we have over 500 copies of that, but it's 1,000 years from the original writing. So that goes back by Mike too. And I'll represent that by this ream of paper. There are 500 sheets in here. Actually, we have 650 copies of the Iliad.